This budget was put through the wringer to tally every number. We have called the bluff that wealth creation is in conflict with welfare and are trying to reinforce that lawfully earning money is not wrong, says Finance Minister. Fresh from presenting a budget that represents a clean break from past policies, Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman was in Chennai last weekend to receive feedback from industrialists and common citizens. The minister explained why the government thinks it is time to recognize wealth creators, the thinking behind bank privatization and the new DFI, while defending the proposals on cess and EPF taxation. Edited excerpts. Recently, the PM said in Parliament that wealth creators should not be run down and that babis should not be running businesses. Your budget also had many industry-friendly features. Does this indicate a fundamental shift in governance where the BJP government is finally coming into its own in terms of a pro-wealth creators, pro-business approach? A fundamental shift in governance was already underway between 2014 and 2019 and we are only continuing with it. Governance is now entirely focused on last-mile delivery, connectivity, simplifying regulatory and administrative compliance and keeping the government at arm's length from institutions that had got too close. I think this kind of emphasis on governance had already started full force right from 2014. As far as the ideology is concerned, I don't think we were far removed from the ideological core of the party, whether in Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time or even earlier. Between 2014 and 2019, there were definitely difficulties because of the party's numbers in the upper house. Now, the numbers in both houses are much improved, especially the upper house. This smoothens the passage for reforms that we plan to undertake. Reforms are not just an activity derived from one's ideological commitments. Reforms are a necessity because this country had gone too far in reiterating a socialist and, what I would call, an imported Jugaad ideology. This so-called welfare state socialism had degenerated into a very rigid and arbitrary regime towards businesses. I believe this budget stands out distinctly because it addresses many of those rigidities, which had come to be regarded as sacred cows, if I may call it that. There also needs to be recognition that socialism is not the only ideology that has a copyright on welfare. When the economy does not do well and wealth isn't generated, then social good suffers and so does the welfare state. So, we have now called the bluff that wealth creation is in conflict with welfare. We are trying to reinforce that lawfully earning money is not wrong. A tax regime that is not oppressive or adversarial can generate sufficient revenues to fund welfare. The budget stance indicates that there is nothing very sacrosanct about the fiscal deficit target of 3%. If not the fiscal deficit, what other debt indicator are you going to target? This year, I don't have the luxury of minding ratios like debt to GDP too much. But I do have the comfort that interest rates are at low levels. Here, I must appreciate the role that RBI has played. We have had a running engagement with RBI that has helped bond yields remain at acceptable levels. That is why, even the GST compensation issue, we decided to arrange for back-to-back loans to the states, without the states having to go to the markets, which would have led to their yields shooting up. As to what we are going to target in terms of a debt indicator, this year we would rather not be focusing too much on that. On strategic sales, going by the BPCL and Air India cases, considerable homework seems to have been done this time around before inviting bids. Why has there been a delay in the sales going through? Is it a case of too few bidders expressing interest? We have had a reasonable number of bidders in both cases. But then since the 2019 elections, there have been ground realities in terms of the state of the economy and the global economy slowing down. There are also checks and balances in the system in terms of bureaucrats cautioning about getting the process and returns right. We want to tick every box before we stand up in Parliament to defend these sales. This has resulted in the delayed timelines. Is your disinvestment projection of 1.75 lakh rupees crore for FY22 too conservative? We have been very realistic about estimating all the numbers in this budget, both in terms of perception and what we can realistically achieve. On disinvestment numbers, till the last moment, we were keeping our pencil and erasers ready to make changes if need be. We didn't want even one number in this year's budget to appear as if we had been a little careless or over-optimistic. Every number has been repeatedly vetted for being achievable. This is a budget that has been put through the wringer repeatedly to get it closer to what is achievable. So yes, it can appear to be too cautious. But I would rather be cautious than stand up and say later that I went wrong. The vehicle scrappage policy announcement in the budget came a few days after a green tax on older vehicles. What kind of outgo do you expect towards compensating manufacturers? Are you working out a subsidy sharing arrangement with states? The final details of the scheme have not been thrashed out yet. Yes, we have gone through the broad implementation plan. The government's approach in such matters is quite holistic. We need to consider the environmental aspects such as the pollution arising from handling this scrap. What we need on the ground is widespread infrastructure for scrapping old vehicles at the district level. There are already a number of cesses being levied, such as on petroleum products. This budget has added on a new agricultural infrastructure development cess. The feeling among states is that cesses deprive them of their rightful share in revenues. Is it fair to go on introducing new cesses that don't devolve on states? When discussing this particular measure, we spent a lot of time working on the idea of cess itself. Yes, it goes to the consolidated fund and doesn't go to the states. When we thought of this, our intent was to have a fund for improving agri-infrastructure in the states. We also wanted to bring down customs duties on necessary imports for downstream and export industries. If we had simply carved out money from customs duty itself, the funds would go into the Consolidated Fund of India, and then you would then have to create a new head of expenditure or go to the Parliament for a new scheme. So we thought that given that customs duty is being reduced, a part of it could be used to improve agricultural infrastructure without going through those time-consuming steps. So this cess, after going to the Consolidated Fund, would be given to states for improving agri-infrastructure. This budget must have been the first one to have used the term privatization with respect to public sector banks. Will you be picking the strong, large PSBs that have emerged out of the mergers of the last couple of years, or the weaker, smaller ones that need recapitalization? I don't think we are proceeding on those lines at all. We have not made any decisions on whether to sell profit-making banks, smaller banks or big ones. We want all banks to become professionally run and to come out of RBI's prompt corrective action framework. In the last 6 years, I think we have shown that we don't interfere in public sector banks' day-to-day decision-making. The drive is to help them build on their strengths. India in the next few years should have strong banks that are able to meet the needs of the economy. With the launch of development financial institutions DFIs from the government and the private sector, we are hoping that long-term infrastructure funding will be taken care of by these institutions. Banks must focus on the primary business of lending for commercial purposes, rather than getting choked by sourcing short-term deposits and lending to long-term projects. Over the years, there have been quite a few tweaks to the EPF. What is the long-term plan for the EPF? Will it be only for those earning up to 15,000 rupees per month basic and DA? No. We have taken a call not to discourage those earning more than 15,000 rupees per month from being part of EPF. But if there are instances of people putting 1 crore rupees a month who get EEE taxation benefit and also get an assured return, I want to make sure that, without hurting those who are in the EPF, I recognize those who are getting the double benefit. How justified is this? I know your question is touching on a larger issue. It's not to look down upon states who want to have quick ways in which they want to raise revenues. So if the end result is consumer should pay less, both center and states should sit together and see how best to handle this. Taking into GST can be an option.